The story goes like this. On a clear December afternoon in 1945, 5 Navy bombers lifted off from the coast of Florida on a routine flight, flew out over calm water in good weather, and never came back. Nothing of them was ever found, not so much as an oil slick on the surface. The plane that went out to look for them never came back either. Come in, friends. The lamp's lit, the night's long, and none of it needs anything from you. Settle wherever you're comfortable and let the day finish without you. Whatever it still wants from you can wait until morning, the way it always could. That story I just told you in one breath is probably the most famous sea mystery of the last 100 years. If some version of it has been sitting in the back of your mind since childhood, the triangle drawn on the ocean, the compasses that spin, the squadron that flew into a clear sky and never landed, then tonight was made for you. Tonight is the Bermuda Triangle. First the great tales exactly as they have been told for 80 years, and then, taken gently in the same order, what the files actually say. That's the whole shape of the night, and I'll say it once more so you can hold it loosely, the way you'd hold a map you don't really need. 3 tales first, then the facts behind each one, and where the facts run out, I'll say so plainly, and what you believe from there is entirely yours. Nobody gets corrected tonight, least of all you. Everybody likes to solve a mystery. That includes me. It's why we're here. What's coming, so you always know where you are. The vanished squadron you've just met, told properly in a moment. Then the ghost ships, which are older and stranger. And then the sea itself, the 3-sided stretch of ocean where none of the ordinary rules are supposed to hold. Then the files, in the same order, one tale at a time, so you never have to wonder where we are. And there's a letter typed by a schoolteacher in Texas that I'm keeping until near the end. It is the quiet answer to the loudest of the tales. You'll know it when it arrives. If you drift before any of it lands, that's the point of this place. The tales will keep. They've kept for 80 years. So, the lost squadron, the way the story has always been told. The 5th of December, 1945. The story goes that the afternoon was clear and bright, ordinary flying weather, and that just after 2 o'clock, 5 Avenger bombers rolled down the runway at the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, one after another, and climbed out over the beach with 14 men aboard. The flight the world would come to know as Flight 19, a name that now carries more weight than any squadron name in American history. Picture them the way the legend paints them. 5 sturdy aircraft in loose formation, low over water so bright it hurt to look at, engine drone steady as a heartbeat, an experienced combat veteran out front. The crews had flown that water dozens of times. Somewhere below, the sea slid by, warm and green over the sandbars, deep blue further out. And nothing about any of it, says the story, gave the smallest warning. Then, as the legend tells it, something began to go wrong that no one has ever explained. The compasses failed. Not one compass, all of them, in every aircraft at once, the needles turning slowly in their housings as if the sea below had quietly let go of north. In the tower back at Fort Lauderdale, men with headsets leaned in as the leader's voice came over the radio. The tale has always insisted there was something strange in it, a man no longer sure of any direction, saying the ocean beneath him didn't look the way it should, that everything looked wrong, that even the sun seemed hard to find. 14 trained men in 5 sturdy aircraft on a route they knew, in weather anyone would have called kind. Lost, all at once, in the same moment, in the same strange way. Through the afternoon the calls grew fainter, the story says, and stranger as they faded. Men ashore standing at radio sets with coffee going cold, listening to 5 aircraft somewhere out in the falling dark, asking each other where the coast had gone. And then the calls stopped. No mayday, no last position. Silence, of the particular kind the legend built itself on. Not the silence of an ending, but of a door closing. Here is the part that made the tale immortal. The part every telling saves the way I'm saving it now. The Navy did what navies do. Within the hour, a big flying boat went out into the night to search. A mariner, built for exactly this, deep-bellied and slow, with 13 men aboard and fuel enough to look until morning. The story likes to linger on the picture. The crew climbing in with flashlights and thermoses, the hull lifting off the dark river, the running lights sliding out over a black ocean that had just swallowed 5 of anything it was sent to find. It vanished too. As the legend tells it, the searcher went into the same dark water after the searched for. The sea closed over all of it. 6 aircraft, 27 men, in a single afternoon and evening off the coast of Florida in peacetime. The greatest search in the history of the region found, according to the tale, not one bolt, not one cushion, not one drop of oil. The ocean simply declined to give anything back. Ships and planes swept the water for days. The story goes that the searchers themselves grew uneasy, that men came home from it saying the sea felt wrong. 27 men, 6 aircraft, a clear day. Nothing found, then or ever. That is the story of the lost squadron, told the way it has been told since before most of us were born. And I've told it to you straight, with all its furniture, because it is a genuinely magnificent story. Whether the files agree with it, that comes later in its turn. The tale isn't finished with you yet, because the water it happened over had a reputation before those 5 planes, and it kept collecting stories after them. The next story is older, and it belongs to the ships. In March of 1918, so the story goes, the Navy's great collier Cyclops lay at the island of Barbados, a ship longer than a city block, her decks alive with something over 300 people. Men on the quay watched her take on stores in the island heat. On the 4th of the month, she stood out of the harbour for Baltimore and sailed into a calm sea, a full cargo under her hatches, experienced officers on her bridge, a wireless set crackling softly in its cabin. She was expected in a week or so, and the story lets you stand a moment in the wireless rooms up the American coast, where operators waited through their watches for a call sign that never came. She never arrived, and the tale leans hard on what did not happen next, because it's the absence that carries it. No distress call, a ship with a radio from which nobody heard a word. No wreckage. From a vessel of 19,000 tons, the sea offered back nothing you could hold in one hand. No storm was reported on her route, says the legend. No enemy claimed her, though there was a war on. The largest ship the Navy had ever lost, gone the way a word is gone when a sentence ends. The story likes to add that the Secretary of the Navy himself called it one of the sea's most baffling mysteries. On that point, I'll tell you now, the story is close to fair. And then, the tale continues, here becoming a legend instead of a loss. Decades later, 2 more ships of the very same family, sisters of the Cyclops built from the same drawings, sailed into the very same waters. Both of them vanished as well. Same family, same ocean, same silence. 3 sisters, 3 disappearances, not one answer among them. The ghost ship tale has one more room in it. The strangest room in the whole house. The story goes that in 1881, an English ship called the Ellen Austin came upon a schooner in the open Atlantic, sailing along under fair canvas, with no one aboard. Not a soul. Cargo intact, everything in order, the wheel swinging free. The captain of the Ellen Austin chose a prize crew, good men, volunteers, and the tale gives you the picture. A small boat pulling across open water between the 2 ships, men climbing a stranger's rail, calling into a silence below decks, finding supper things stowed and bunks made, and not one living soul. A squall came up, the ships lost sight of each other, and when they found the schooner again, as the legend tells it, she was empty once more. The prize crew was gone. Some tellings go further still. A second crew put aboard, and the ship and that crew never seen again at all. A ship that emptied itself twice. It is told around fires and in paperbacks in a dozen versions whose tellings disagree with each other. Hold that thought gently for later. Empty ships, silent sisters, a sea that takes crews and leaves the vessels, or takes the vessels whole. That is how the ship's story goes. One more now, the biggest of them, the story of the water itself. The last of the 3 isn't about any one ship or flight. It is about the water itself, the idea that ties all the others together. Draw it in your mind the way the books draw it. One line from Florida out to the island of Bermuda. One line down from Bermuda to Puerto Rico. One line home again through the Bahamas. Inside those 3 lines, the story goes, lies a stretch of ocean where the ordinary rules hold their breath. Compasses wander there, the tale says. Theirs is supposedly one of the only places on earth where the needle plays false. Instruments fail in clear weather. Radios fill with noise that isn't weather and isn't traffic. Ships and planes have gone missing there, the legend insists, in numbers no other sea can match. Going without wreckage, without bodies, without goodbye. The tale reaches all the way back to the very first crossing. Christopher Columbus himself, the story says, saw a strange light dancing over these waters on his first voyage, weeks before landfall, and watched his own compass misbehave. So the sea was marked as strange before anyone had even named it. Sailors' tales collected around it for centuries, a region ships avoided, a place old charts dressed in warnings. And the modern version has its own furniture. The insurance men of London, the story goes, the famous House of Lloyds, were said to charge more, or refuse outright, to cover a vessel bound through the triangle. When the money men are frightened, the tale suggests, the rest of us should take notice. By the 1970s, the tale had a name, the Bermuda Triangle, and the whole world's attention was on it at once. A paperback with that name on the cover sat at number 1 on the bestseller list for 18 straight weeks. Millions of copies, translated everywhere, read on the very airliners that crossed the water it warned about. Its cover art a lonely ship under a green sky. Television found it too. Families in dim living rooms, the documentary narrator's voice low over dark waves, asking what strange force waited out there, while the reflection of the screen moved on the window glass. If you carried this story out of childhood, the triangle on the map, the spinning compass, the vanished squadron, this is where it reached you from, with no shame in it. For one long decade, practically everybody believed some of it. So there they are, the squadron that vanished with its rescuer, the ships that went silent or sailed home empty, and the three-sided piece of ocean where none of the rules apply. Told the way they've always been told, with the lights down. Now we do what the promise said. We take the same three tales in the same order and open the files, the actual paperwork, the actual newspapers, the actual words on the actual radio. Some of what's in there answers the tales. Some of it, honestly, does not. I'll be plain with you about which is which as we go. The files on Flight 19 first. The Flight 19 file is real and enormous. About 545 pages, typed by Navy clerks in the weeks after that December afternoon. Here is what it actually says, plainly, one thing at a time. First, it was not a patrol. The word has been welded onto the story for 80 years. The Lost Patrol, in capital letters, on book jackets. And there was no patrol. It was a lesson. The Navy called it Navigation Problem Number 1, which tells you nearly everything. Not problem number 9, not the advanced one, the first one. A training triangle for students. Out east to a bombing target, a leg north, then home. About 2 hours and 40 minutes. Flown that afternoon for the third and final time by young men who had nearly finished the course. The war had ended 3 months earlier. This was homework. Over water they had crossed dozens of times. Worth saying slowly, because the legend needs it not to be true. The whole exercise sits in a box of ocean off the Florida coast. According to the board's own record of the route, it never went within 800 miles of Bermuda or of Puerto Rico. The most famous disappearance in the Bermuda Triangle happened nowhere near most of the Bermuda Triangle. Second, the first words of the emergency are in the file, because a man heard them and repeated them under oath. A Marine Corps captain named Edward Powers was flying his own exercise nearby, with the training frequency turned up in his headset, the way you leave a radio on in another room. Into that came a voice, one of the students, not frightened, not strange, just embarrassed, the way a person sounds when the turning was 4 miles back. "I don't know where we are." That was all. He added they must have gotten lost after the last turn. That is the true opening line of the greatest aviation mystery of the century. A student, mildly annoyed with himself. Third, the instructor. His name was Charles Taylor, a lieutenant, a real combat veteran, new to Fort Lauderdale, and by 4:20 he was telling the tower his compasses were out and he was trying to find Fort Lauderdale. Then he said where he believed he was, over the Florida Keys, the low green islands south of Miami. The file is quiet and devastating on this point. He was roughly 150 miles northeast of there, over the Bahamas, looking down at broken land that looks, from 2,000 feet, very much like other broken land. Every decision that followed grew from that one wrong belief. He turned the flight northeast to get home, which would have worked beautifully from where he thought he was. From where he actually was, it pointed them out to sea. One belief, held by one tired man in an aircraft without a working compass. The file holds nothing stranger than that, and the argument that broke out next is the most human thing in it. Because the students knew. That's in the file too, the part I find hardest to sit with. At least 2 of the young men had worked out the answer, and they were right. Put the setting sun on your nose, fly west, and Florida cannot be missed. It is a very large thing. They had flown that coast for months. They were also 19 and 20 years old, arguing on an open radio frequency with the officer who taught them, which is not a thing you do lightly. One of them did it anyway, flatly, into a microphone. The transcript in the file kept his words and lost his name. Damn it, if we could just fly west, we could get home. Nobody knows why the flight didn't turn. The file holds no record of Taylor refusing and none of him agreeing. The radio simply grew fainter through the evening, which is what radios do when aircraft fly further away, and the last of it was gone before 8 o'clock. The board of officers, who spent weeks over all of this afterwards, wrote a summary about as close to an admission as a service document ever gets. They could not, they said, even make a good guess at what had happened. When I tell you the file is honest, that sentence is what I mean. Where it knows, it says. Where it doesn't, it says that too. Now the search plane. Because the file answers that one almost completely. The Mariner flying boat went out at 27 minutes past 7 with 13 men. The legend says it vanished without a trace into the same mystery. The file says, at about 9:15, the crew of a tanker out in the Atlantic watched a light in the sky climb and then fall, and steamed to the spot, and found burning oil on the water. The Mariner was an aircraft with a reputation among the men who flew it. It could hold fuel vapor in the hull. Crews had a grim nickname for it on that account. An explosion in the air, seen by a ship's whole watch, at the right time, in the right place. Grief, but not mystery. And one more page from the station's own records, the one that reframes the entire night for me. Fort Lauderdale was a wartime training factory. It existed to teach thousands of young men to fly the Avenger, fast, over water, in weather. Between 1942 and 1946, according to the station's own museum, it lost 94 trainees. Flight 19's 14 were 14 of that 94. The other 80 went down in ones and twos on ordinary Tuesdays into the same water. Not one of them has a legend, a book, or a shape on a map. Their families got the same telegram and the same folded flag. The world never asked a single question about them. The difference was never the water. The difference is that 14 went at once, into paperwork that would soon say 2 particular words. Which brings us to the letter. The letter I've been keeping from you was typed on the 25th of November, 1946, almost a year after that afternoon. In a house in Corpus Christi, Texas, a few blocks up from the bay. A schoolteacher named Catherine Taylor sat at her typewriter and wrote 3 pages, single-spaced, to a woman in another state she had never met. The mother of a 19-year-old radio man who had been aboard one of the 5 aircraft. Catherine Taylor was the flight instructor's mother. Her son was the man the Navy's report had, by then, written down as responsible for the whole thing. You'd expect a grieving letter. It isn't one. That's the first thing that goes through you when you read it. The second is something closer to awe. It's a technical brief. It has an argument. The argument is built, every claim in it pointing at a document. She had read the board's findings. She knew how to petition the Navy to correct a record and what the deadlines were. She had hired a lawyer in Washington. She and her sister had been at this for the better part of a year, against a Navy that answered her slowly and politely and not at all. The Secretary of the Navy himself had signed 2 letters telling her the case was closed. Early in her own letter, she set down 5 words with nothing around them to soften them. I am becoming very impatient. She carried on. Here is what she was actually arguing, and notice that it has nothing to do with mystery. She had learned that on the evening of the 5th of December, there was a ready plane at Fort Lauderdale, an aircraft fueled, crewed, held at readiness for exactly this, and that it was never sent. That was her whole case. Not fog, not compasses, nothing strange. One decision on the ground by people at desks, while 5 aircraft went further out over dark water. And in the middle of her brief, the schoolteacher does something no board of inquiry ever did. She imagines it. She asks the other mother to picture that plane going out to the northeast, catching the flight, drawing alongside, telling them the one thing they needed telling. Fly west, fly west, fly west. Which is exactly what her son's own students had said on the radio. She could not have known that. The transcript was in a file she was never shown. She won. Not everything. The ready plane question was never answered. But in 1947, the Navy amended its findings, struck the sentence blaming her son out of the record, and wrote 2 words in its place. Cause unknown. That's all they are. 2 flat administrative words, meaning a room of officers agreed in writing that they didn't know. But hold them a moment, because those 2 words are the seed of everything in part 1 of tonight. A mother fought the United States Navy for 2 years to take blame out of a file, and the empty space she won, cause unknown, is the space the entire legend later moved into and furnished. She wasn't selling anything. She only wanted the record to say the true thing, which was that nobody knew. That is the whole of the Flight 19 file. The ships next. The ghost ships then. And the file on the Cyclops opens on a detail the legend never mentions. She was riding low. In that first week of March 1918, the men on the quay at Barbados who watched her load could see it. A collier is a coal carrier, an unglamorous ship built to follow a fleet the way a fuel truck follows an army. But that trip she wasn't carrying coal. She was carrying manganese ore out of Brazil, a heavier, denser, meaner cargo than her holds were designed around, lying in the bottom of her like shot in a sack. She sailed on the 4th of March and was never seen again, and on the silence the legend is right. No distress call was ever recorded, and no wreckage found. It was wartime, so the country blamed the enemy. When the German archives were opened after the war, according to the Navy's own historians, nothing was there. But watch what the record does with the sisters. The detail the legend tells is deepening the mystery. 2 sister ships, decades later, gone in the same waters, yes. And every one of the 3 lost sisters was carrying ore instead of coal. A 4th sister, the Orion, was caught in a hurricane off Virginia in December 1925 and very nearly broke in half. Ore aboard, same design, and survived to be studied. The Associated Press put that story on the wire, noting that this was the fate many marine authorities already believed had taken the Cyclops. By April of 1926, American newspapers were running the mystery as solved. Navy officials believed they had the answer. A ship's back breaking under a cargo she wasn't drawn for. That was printed in papers anyone could buy, 38 years before anyone had drawn a triangle on that ocean. The explanation went into the archive. The mystery went everywhere else. 2 more ships, quickly and plainly, because each one is a full answer. The Cotopaxi, a steamer lost in 1925, cited for most of a century as one of the taken. In 2020, she was identified, about 35 miles off St. Augustine, as a wreck Florida divers had been swimming over for decades under the name the Bear Wreck. She had never gone anywhere. She sent a distress call in a storm and sank, and lay there being visited while the book said she'd vanished, waiting for one person to check the insurance records. And the Ellen Austin, the ship that emptied twice. Here the record simply runs dry. No log, no crew list. No contemporary account of a prize crew has ever been found, and the versions of the tale multiply and contradict each other the further they get from any source. But one detail is in print, and it's a quiet marvel. The founding magazine article of the whole legend, the one that coined the name Bermuda Triangle, places that schooner, in its own words, west of the Azores. Look at a map some daylight hour. That is the middle of the open Atlantic, some 2,000 miles from the triangle the very same article was drawing on the very same page. Those are the ships. Overloaded hulls, a storm and an unread insurance file, and one beautiful tale that drifts 2,000 miles the moment anyone asks it where it happened. Now the biggest tale of all, the water itself. Start with the shape itself, because the file on the water begins with a surprise. There is no file. No agency of the American government recognizes the Bermuda Triangle. The office that charts the coasts says plainly that no official maps exist which delineate its boundaries. The board that decides what American places are called holds no file on the name. Ask 2 books to draw it and you get 2 different oceans. Published sizes run from 500,000 square miles to 1.5 million. A disagreement roughly the size of India. The triangle has no edges because nobody official ever drew any. The compasses next. The claim was checkable, so it has been checked. Computed across every waypoint of Flight 19's actual route, the magnetic variation that afternoon spanned about 2.5 degrees, nowhere reaching even 2 degrees off true north. 2 degrees is a rounding error at the scale of finding Florida. Whatever went wrong in Taylor's cockpit that day went wrong in his cockpit. The sea beneath him was magnetically about as ordinary as water gets. And Columbus's dancing light is real and in his journal, but it was seen far from these waters. His compass behaved the way every compass of that century behaved once anyone learned what to measure. As for finding no wreckage, picture anything afloat there at dusk. The Gulf Stream comes through like a warm river inside the cold sea. By morning, according to the oceanographers who have measured it continuously for 40 years, that floating thing can be 25 miles away. The sea isn't hiding anything, it's carrying it. And the emptiness the legend needs. The lonely, unearthly water was never true either. That water is one of the busiest working seas on Earth and has been for centuries. In the Bahamas of the 1850s, 1 person in 10 held a government license to salvage wrecks. The working shape of the trade is a lovely thing the island museums keep. A boy went up the tallest tree on the quay before first light, a job for the lightest in the family, and sat through the grey of the morning with the wind coming through the leaves, watching the line where the reef showed white. When he saw what he'd been sent up for, he called it down. The settlement heard him, and every boat went at once. Whole island families whose trade was knowing exactly what went down where, in what year, carrying what. Dinner table knowledge, 2 generations gone before anyone drew a triangle over their water. In the 20s came the rum fleet, boats running liquor to Florida at night. unlit, registered under borrowed foreign names, and a boat with no true owner on paper legally cannot be reported missing. So nobody will ever know how many quietly went down. And in 1942, German submarines made this the deadliest water on the planet for merchant ships. 41 vessels lost inside it before the end of 1 May. There's one night from that spring I keep. A submarine torpedoed a tanker 2 miles off Jacksonville Beach, and according to the commander's own log, quoted in his obituaries long afterward, he then moved his boat deliberately between the burning ship and the shore, so his deck gun would fire out to sea rather than in toward the town. Because the boardwalk was lit, the wheel was turning, and he could see the hotel and the cars and the people who had come out to watch. Crowded water, fast water, and half a century of vessels with excellent reasons to disappear from paperwork. That is what the legend was standing on. One last item from this file, my favourite in the whole cabinet. The Lloyds of London story, the frightened insurance men. No document has ever been produced, no date, no named underwriter, no policy. The line is quoted everywhere and sourced nowhere. The searches for its origin come back empty, which is worth saying out loud, gently, because it means the skeptic shelf has folklore on it too. Believers didn't invent that habit. Everybody likes a good story. Everybody, remember, is the theme of the night. So if the water is ordinary, who built the triangle? The file has names, 4 of them, and not one villain. 4 men, 4 ordinary jobs, 14 years. I'll give you each in one breath, in order, because the chain is simple when it's told simply. 1950. In a wire service office in Miami, a reporter named E.V.W. Jones fills his Saturday feature slot, the same slot he fills every week, with a wistful piece about how much ocean remains unaccounted for in the age of radar. He names no triangle, draws no shape, proposes no cause, but he coins a phrase the next 40 years would live inside, calling the sea the same misty limbo of the lost. A shrug, beautifully worded, on a deadline. 1952. A freelancer named George X. Sand, writing for a small magazine of the strange called Fate, describes the shape for the first time anywhere. A watery triangle bounded roughly by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. 12 years before the name existed. And in the same breath, he tells his readers the place is ordinary busy water. The most skipped man in the chain is the one who drew it. 1962. A magazine writer named Alan Eckert, later a serious, twice-honoured novelist, retells Flight 19 for a Veterans Monthly, and in his version, the flight leader speaks words that appear in no radio log, no transcript, and no witness's memory, including the famous line that the ocean doesn't look as it should. Where he got it, nobody has ever established. I don't call that a lie. A writer on a 17-year-old story with no archive and a deadline, reaching for how it must have felt. But the sentence left the building as fact, and it has never come back. The even more famous line about white water is in Nothing at All, hunted through every archive by people who do that for a living, and it has no author anyone can find. 1964. Somewhere in California, at a desk on an afternoon nobody recorded, a freelancer named Vincent Gaddis opens his article in a men's adventure magazine by handing the reader a pencil. Draw a line from Florida to Bermuda, another to Puerto Rico, a third back home. 3 lines that had never existed anywhere before, and then refers to the area inside. His own invention on that page for the first time in history, as the one known as the Bermuda Triangle. Known as. 2 words that told a million readers everyone else already knew. 10 years later came the flood. The paperback, #1 for 18 weeks. And here is a detail I didn't expect and have come to love. The bestseller list in those years printed a 1-line editorial description under each title, written by the newspaper itself. For all 18 weeks, directly beneath that #1, the paper of record printed its own verdict. Uncritical theorizing about allegedly mysterious ship-plane disappearances. It sold the book to the country and told the country not to believe it, simultaneously, in a space narrower than your thumb. The country, quite reasonably, read the title and not the small print. I'd have done the same. A columnist, a freelancer, a novelist, a man with a pencil, and a publisher with a great title. No conspiracy, no liar, no villain anywhere. Just deadlines, each man building in good faith on the man before. That's who made the Bermuda Triangle. It took one librarian to unmake it, and he wasn't even trying. His name was Lawrence Cusher, and he was a reference librarian at Arizona State University. Not a debunker, not a skeptic with a column, just a man whose job was the ancient one. A student asks a question, and you find them a real answer. In the early 70s, the students kept arriving with the same question, the way a term paper topic goes around a campus. The Bermuda Triangle. Where can I read about the Bermuda Triangle? So he pulled the books, because that's the job, and stood there with them open on the desk. And the footnotes went in a circle. This book's authority was that book. That book's authority was an article. The article's authority was the first book again. Somewhere at the bottom, there should have been a newspaper from the week a ship was lost, a weather report, an inquiry. There wasn't. Nobody had ever gone down there. Every writer had assumed somebody upstream had done the looking, the way numbers get copied forward unchecked from paper to paper for decades. Here is the part that changes how you hear everything he later wrote, and it's from his own account, given as a talk to a room of librarians in 1975. He wasn't trying to spoil anything. He wanted to write a Bermuda Triangle book of his own, a proper one, a good one, and he wanted to be first. He liked the mystery. He was inside the wanting, exactly like everybody else, exactly like me. He only went to the primary sources to write the best possible version of the thing. And the sources kept handing him the answer he wasn't looking for. A ship reported as vanishing in calm weather turned out to have gone down in a storm the newspapers of that week described in detail. A famous triangle vanishing turned out to have happened somewhere else entirely. One by one, not because he hunted them down, but because he looked, and looking was enough. In his own words to that room, almost rueful, the solution was an unexpected bonus I did not seek. He called what he'd found a manufactured mystery, and said he had no interest in calling anyone a fraud. And then he said the sentence I would put on the wall of every newsroom and classroom. People fail to tell the difference, he said, between an event that is genuinely mysterious and an event about which nobody has yet bothered to look anything up. They are not the same thing. That's the whole machine, described by a librarian at a lectern without once raising his voice. Nearly everything in the three great tales is the second kind, not a hole in the world, a hole in the reading. Nearly everything, not everything. And that remainder is where we're going now, because it belongs to you. Because here is what the files do not hold, said as plainly as everything else tonight. No one has ever found the 5 Avengers or the 14 young men who flew them. The board could not guess, and neither in 80 years has anyone else. The where is answered well enough, but the last hour is not, and likely never will be. No one heard a final word from the Cyclops, and the broken back explanation, sound as the engineers find it, has never been proven by a hull on the seabed. She has simply never been found. The Ellen Austin's twice emptied schooner has no record behind it at all, which means no record to debunk it with either. The sea kept those pages. So this is the honest place the night arrives at, and it's the place I promised you at the start. Where the files speak, I've read them to you. Where they go silent, they are silent, and what you believe in that silence is entirely yours. If you want the plainest reading, overloaded ships, a wrong turn, fast water, the record will hold your weight. If you'd rather keep a little of the strangeness, keep it. Nobody owns the gaps, and nobody ever has. That's not a loophole in the story. That is the story. And it's worth knowing, as you settle, that the sea does answer sometimes, on its own schedule, to people who keep asking nicely. A submarine the Navy lost in the deep Atlantic in 1968 was found within months by a team who wrote down every story of what might have happened. Let arithmetic weigh them against each other, and searched where the numbers pointed. She lay a few hundred yards from the likeliest square. An airliner that vanished into the Andes in 1947, 4,000 miles from any triangle, was handed back 50 years later by a glacier which had been carrying the wreck slowly downhill the whole time, the way glaciers carry everything. Patience, arithmetic, in somebody who goes and looks. The sea keeps things, but it isn't hiding them. And the ones it keeps longest, it keeps for everyone equally, believer and skeptic alike, out past the last light, where all our stories go to wait. One last page then, from the man who drew the triangle, because Vincent Gaddis's founding article has a closing paragraph. After everything tonight, I read it differently than I expected to. He wasn't selling fear. Read his last lines and there is no menace in them at all. He wrote that in spite of our swift wings and the voice of radio, the world is still large enough for men and their machines and their ships to go out of it without a trace. In 1964, with the maps filled in, the blank spaces measured and named and photographed from above, that was not a threat. That was a comfort. He was telling a catalogued world that there was still somewhere left uncatalogued, still room in the world to lose something, which means room for the world to be bigger than the paperwork says. And he closed with a line that has lasted 60 years because it is more lullaby than warning. The sea guards well her secrets. He meant it kindly. I think everyone in tonight's story meant it kindly. The reporters on their deadlines, the paperback readers, the librarian who wanted the mystery and found the answer, the mother at her typewriter who only wanted 2 true words in a file. Everybody likes to solve a mystery, and everybody, somewhere quiet, likes to leave 1 or 2 unsolved. Out past the reef, where the water is dark and warm, and going north the way it has all along. It's out there tonight, carrying whatever it carries. The airport at Fort Lauderdale sends holiday flights over it every hour. They all come home. The lamp is low. Nothing in any of it wants a single thing from you. It is quiet. And that is where I'll leave it. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. If you are still awake and this one stayed with you, I would be glad to know of it. A review if you are moved to leave one, a suggestion for a story you would like told, a gentle correction if I have gotten something wrong. But none of it is for now. It can keep until morning. There is nothing left to do. Let the room stay quiet and let yourself rest. I will be here.